What's up, football world? I am Bucky Brooks, and this is the Bucky Brooks Show. And look, it's been a few days since I've been able to jump on the pod. The draft has occupied all the time, but now I've had a chance to review, reflect, and it is time to assess what took place over a 3-day weekend where we saw all of these top prospects land with their teams. It was an exciting time to see the players and teams come together. There's a lot that goes into this. And let me shout out FanDuel Sportsbook for being one of our top sponsors. They are putting out all kinds of odds. We have the LA Rams at plus 700 to win the Super Bowl. Obviously, we have to talk about the Rams because they're one of the biggest stories. And we'll get to that in a minute when it comes to them and their controversial pick with Ty Simpson. But I want to give like a general overview on the draft. And leading into the draft, there was a lot of conversation about this class and the class kind of lacking pizzazz because the top players in the draft outside of Fernando Mendoza were a lot of what we call non-premium positions. So you had Sonny Styles as an off-ball linebacker that was getting a lot of buzz. I mean, you can lump Arvell Reese into that category as well. Jeremiah Love was viewed by some, including me, as the best player in the draft. You had Caleb Downs, who was highly regarded as a safety. You had tackles that were at the top of the board, but they were right tackles instead of your traditional left tackles that are traditionally viewed as the best players on the offensive line. And so there was a lot of like conversation about like, how do we treat this draft? Is this a legitimate draft? Will there be a lot of movement and those things? And it was a lot of movement. But I think the theme of this draft was all about the trenches and the bigs. When you look at the draft, particularly, I want you to understand when you think about the draft, you want to think about it in the first 3 rounds of where teams really focus their efforts on finding their starters, their key contributors, and the like. The 4th through 7th round is about the backups, your developmental guys that slip through the cracks for some kind of reasons, whether it's medical or character concerns or whatever. But the bulk of the draft is about, hey, we got to get these 1st, 2nd, and 3rd round picks correct, because these are the guys that if you look over time, they pretty much make up most of the roster. Really, it's 1st and 2nd rounders making up the bulk of the roster. This draft, we saw 9 offensive linemen go in round 1. We saw 13 edge rushers go within the first 70 picks. And we saw 9 tight ends come off the board during the first 3 rounds. And we always talk about this being a cyclical thing where what happens one year leads to a counter reaction that happens the next year. And one of the biggest things that happened in the 2025 season was the return of the running game, the return of the bigs, the return of multiple tight end sets, particularly 13 personnel, which is 1 back, 3 tight ends, 1 wide receiver. The LA Rams used it better than anybody else. Matthew Stafford was largely MVP because of his success in that personnel grouping. Well, that led to a lot of teams copying what they saw the Rams do successfully by putting the bigs on the field. You also have to understand defensively, the last couple of years, people have been following Vic Fangio's lead, 2 high safeties, light boxes, smaller defenders running around making plays as they're daring teams to run the football, because the defensive focal point was taking the explosive play away, making people drive the length of the field, die a slow death on defense, as defensive coordinators would say, and challenge the offensive coordinator to be patient and disciplined enough to take what the defense is willing to concede. Offenses countered by running the football and really pushing it at people and kind of getting back to that rough and rugged 3 yards in a cloud of dust with a little splash of play action pass and the run game. And I think that's what we saw out. That's what we saw play out when we saw all of these bigs go in the first couple rounds. And so I want to talk about that general overview, but I also have like some questions that I was beginning to ask myself and ask some people that I text throughout the weekend about the draft. And we're going to go through those things. And then my hope is tomorrow we'll begin to kind of break it down and talk about division by division, teams, reviews. I am not a fan of draft grades, but I can give you an assessment of what I think teams were doing and how it played out. But first, people talked to me in the immediate aftermath, and they were like, man, what's your favorite pick of the entire draft? And I'm going to tell you, Reuben Bain going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers was my absolute favorite pick. And I have to tell you, part of this stems from a conversation that I had with Ty Bowles walking to the combine one day. We talked about, man, we got to get back to being who we are. And we need edge players. We need linebackers. We got to get back to the physicality and toughness that has been a hallmark of our teams. And when you think about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers winning 4 straight division titles prior to last year, like a lot of it was because on defense, they beat you up. They beat you up. They bloodied your nose. They blitzed you. They sent pressure. They were relentless. Well, when I think about Reuben Bain at Miami, particularly the way that he played in the college football playoff, man, there's not a more physical, rugged, high effort guy on the draft board than Reuben Bain. And there was a lot of conversation and consternation about his short arms and those things. But when you turn on the tape, he gets after it. As defensive coaches like to talk about, he is a legitimate war daddy at the point of attack. For Ty Bowles to select him at 15, this was an identity pick for Ty Bowles and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This was about them getting back to being the bullies on the block like they pride themselves in. But it wasn't just Reuben Bain, because he is my favorite pick. It was also them adding a Josiah Trotter, a linebacker from Missouri, adding Keontae Scott, a nickel DB from Miami. Both guys, when you turn on their tape, man, they play with their hair on fire. They're physical as they come. They're not afraid of the smoke, and they set the tone. So when you take those and combine them with what Reuben Bain brings, this was about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers getting back to business, getting back to being the physical team that likes to impose their will. Reuben Bain is the one that sets the tone for that. That's why he is my favorite pick. When we look at drafts, a lot of times we also try and figure out who are the stars, because it's one thing to talk about the draft ahead of time without knowing where the players are going. It's another time to see who they match up with and how that team can set them up for success. Caleb Downs for the Dallas Cowboys is going to be a superstar. Let me say that again. Caleb Downs for the Dallas Cowboys is going to be a superstar, and he's going to be a superstar for all the things that made us love him leading into the draft. When he came into the draft, I felt like he was the best defensive player on the board because his instinct, awareness, his communication skills, the versatility that he showed, and he played for 2 NFL head coaches that allowed him to be the defensive quarterback. First at Alabama, Nick Saban handpicked him to be kind of the traffic cop for Alabama in his final season. Then he goes to Ohio State. Matt Patricia comes over as the defensive coordinator his final season. Matt Patricia hands him the keys, allows him to do a bunch of different things that NFL coaches will allow him to do. Playing within that triangle, and that triangle I talk about, free safety, strong safety, nickel corner. He can do all of those things. Given the freedom to play like that, he excelled. And I know after the combine, he was overshadowed by Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese, and those guys went ahead of him. But I'm telling you right now, the coaches would say Caleb Downs was the best player on that defense at Ohio State. And Caleb Downs playing in Dallas, where he is going to be featured on a number of primetime games on Sunday night, Monday night, Thursday night, where the world is going to have an opportunity to see his impact and how good he is. He is going to be a star, and he's my favorite to be the defensive rookie of the year. Okay, now we got to get to this because I've already taken 2 things and we haven't talked about it, because the draft actually pivoted when the LA Rams selected Ty Simpson. So naturally, when you're on TV and you're talking about it, everyone wants to know, what are your thoughts on the Rams taking Ty Simpson? That's a reach. Why wouldn't they take a weapon? Matthew Stafford is in the twilight of his career, coming off an MVP season. They were the second best team in the league. They need to get another weapon to compete with the Seattle Seahawks. I get all of that. But let me tell you how it actually operates when we talk about it in a front office space. The general manager is tasked with trying to keep the team as a viable contender for the long term. The head coach is thinking about the here and now. How can I get my team to win this week, this year? How can we maximize the players that we have today? And that's all they're focused on. Well, Les Snead understands this is like, hold on. We have an opportunity to get a quarterback when we don't need a quarterback. We're not necessarily beholden to what the draft class produces. We can get one right now and put them away, let them develop, let him grow within our system before we get him ready. I kind of liken it to when we go to the grocery store. We all go to the grocery store, and there are different times when we go. If I go to the grocery store after I'm leaving the gym and I'm hungry, I'm gonna come back with a bunch of snacks that don't really add up for what my fitness goals are. But if I am following my list and taking my time, and I have enough time to really sort through what I really want and how I want to kind of put the things in the pantry, I make better decisions. So this is Les Snead in his mind making a good decision for the future. Now, we can debate whether the quarterback is the right quarterback, but in theory, I understand what the Rams are doing and what Les Snead had on his mind when he said, "Oh, we're going to take a quarterback right here at 13 because this is a perfect opportunity for us to get the face of the franchise for the future without feeling the pressure of, oh, we just got to take whatever quarterback comes to us." When you look at the team that has had the most success with their quarterback stability, it's been the Green Bay Packers, right? The Green Bay Packers had Brett Favre, then they handed it off to Aaron Rodgers, then Aaron Rodgers handed it off to Jordan Love, and we can say that the Green Bay Packers have had a 30-plus year run of quarterback stability. That is what everyone seeks, and that's what everyone aspires to have. Now, when we go back to the Green Bay Packers comparison, the Packers drafted Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers sat for 3 years before he played. He then played for a long time, maybe 13, 14 years before he can seize the position to Jordan Love. Jordan Love sat for 2 or 3 years before he takes over. And you've seen the consistency and the success for the Packers. The Packers are always in the playoffs. They're always in the conversation, being one of the top teams. Well, if you're the Rams, you want to be a perennial contender. That's the way to go. The problem that you have is Ty Simpson has to defy a lot of odds for this scenario to play out the way that the Rams wanted to play out. Ty Simpson enters the league with only 15 career starts, a notoriously no number for first-round quarterbacks to have success in the league. You think about Trey Lance had 17, Mark Sanchez had 16, Dwayne Haskins had 14, Anthony Richardson 14, Mitch Trubisky 13. Really hasn't worked out. The only guys that have really worked out with so few starts have been like Kyler Murray and Cam Newton. And the difference about those guys is they have superpowers when it comes to their athleticism and those things. And Ty Simpson, you don't have that. You have inexperience. You have maybe substandard size dimensions. You have durability concerns. And you just don't know if this guy's going to be the player that we want him to be because we haven't seen him enough to really understand that. Les Snead is banking on his relationship with Ty Simpson's dad, the development model that Sean McVay has put in place to help all quarterbacks that have played under him succeed. And they're saying that they can draft around and build it. It's risky, but I understand. And none of us will really know how this plays out until 3 or 4 years down the line when Ty Simpson has an opportunity to take the ball and deliver. I understand it in theory, but in seeing how it plays out in practicality, it's a risky proposition, particularly when your coach didn't look like he was very happy with the scenario. We'll see how it plays out. Sean McVay later came back and tried to love up Ty Simpson, but it's a delicate thing to manage when you have an MVP quarterback coming back and there's a first-round quarterback entering the room. You just got to navigate that out. Nice theory. We'll see how it happens in practicality. Now what I want to do is I want to briefly go through the rest of the draft because I think 7-round draft, there's so many great picks and so many things to talk about and so many players to talk about. I think the easiest way to do it is to go through round by round and I just tell you, hey, what I thought was the best value pick within each round. And I'm starting in the first round. And this team stays true to who they are. And this is the Baltimore Ravens taking Yaone from Penn State. And Yaone is a guy that's interesting because I feel like he was the best offensive lineman in the class. He is physical. He's a force. He kind of helps the Ravens get back to bullying people at the point of attack. When the Ravens have been the Ravens, a lot of times it's been because their bigs overwhelm you. They run the football, and over a 60-minute game, they wear you down. Well, Vanga, big boy, is going to do that because that's what he specializes in. He can pull, he can kick, he can play zone, he can play in a gap scheme. He uproots defenders. We talk about moving the furniture. He moves the furniture around the room, and this is going to be a great pick for them because remember, Baltimore Ravens lost Tyler Linderbaum, and even though Linderbaum is a center, we talk about the interior trio, the guard and the center and the two guards. having to be dominant at the point of attack. You want to be a championship team, you got to be strong right down the middle. Vega Yaone gives them a chance to be dominant right in the middle of that offensive line. Second round, let's go to Miami and Jacob Rodriguez from Texas Tech, being the 43rd overall pick, going to Jeff Hafley and John Eric Sullivan to really be a culture changer in Miami. And they talked about, man, we want smart, we want tough, we want physical. Well, they certainly are getting that in Rodriguez. Man, he is smart, instinctive. He's a playmaker. He's a ball hawk. You look at the number of turnovers that he forced and generated. Those things can't be taught. And when you're a defense like Miami, where Jeff Hafley wants to play what we call vision and break, vision on the quarterback, break on the ball, break on the throws, create chaos and turnovers by being on it, Jacob Rodriguez is the perfect fit for that. When you think about him and the rest of the class, you have a vision for where the Miami Dolphins want to go. Man, you can't get much better than smart, tough, physical. They have all those things locked in. Jacob Rodriguez is a great part of that. Third round, New York Football Giants. The New York Football Giants, who I felt like had a great draft, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. They really got back to business in terms of being the G-men. And when we talk about the G-men, George Young, by way of Jerry Reese, there was a story that Jerry Reese told me. He said, when the Giants are the Giants, is because they impose their will on people because they're giants. We go get big people. We dominate them. We play with force. We're not a finesse team. And that always resonated with me when Jerry Reese was the general manager. And when he told me that in confidence, Malachi Fields going to the Giants plays into that G-men theme where they talk about being the bigger, stronger team that wears you down. Malachi Fields being 6'4", being a guy that dominated at the Senior Bowl practices all week to the point where people were talking about him being a first-round pick. It didn't play out like that, but in the third round, you're getting a guy that I believe is a natural X receiver, a guy that can be on the backside, a guy that can win the one-on-ones. And even though people are talking about the speed concerns, what I've seen and watching him at Virginia and at Notre Dame, he dominates as a route runner. He creates separation in space. He wins the 50-50 balls. He has a huge catch radius that expands the strike zone for Jackson Dart and that quarterback. And down in the red zone, when you have him opposite Malik Neighbors, you're going to have someone that can naturally put points on the board. For the Giants to find that kind of impact playmaker, in my mind, in the third round, tremendous value, which is why I love the pick. Fourth round, anytime you're able to get a first-round talent in the fourth round, it's a win. Jermod McCoy from Tennessee was hanging on the board, and the Las Vegas Raiders traded up to get him at the first pick of the fourth round. And in Jermod McCoy, you have a guy who is a natural press man corner, a guy who is feisty and physical on the edge, great instincts, awareness, ball skills, makes plays all the time, and really has what we call elite cornerback one skills. He was rated the number 1 or 2 corner in this draft going into it until the concerns about his knee really led him to fall down the charts. Well, John Spytek says, hey, look, this is tremendous value. Let's get him right here in the fourth. We'll get him with our medical people. And if it works out, man, we are getting a tremendous return on investment on a fourth-round pick who has first-round talent. Anytime you have an opportunity to cash in on that, you do it. So Jermod McCoy going to the Raiders in the fourth round, that is the best value that you can find on day 3. That's why he's on my list. Round 5, who is the best value? Emmett Johnson going to the Kansas City Chiefs. I'll say this. I am a fan of Emmett Johnson. I was a fan of him when he was in the process early on. In my running back rankings, I thought he was the second or third best running back early. Didn't run particularly well at the combine, but when you go back and watch the tape, he dominated as a running back for Nebraska in the Big Ten. And it's not only the way that he dominated with the ball in his hands, it's the way that he can catch the ball out of the backfield and do so many different things as what I believe is a complete running back. Well, in Kansas City, the value works out because they just signed Kenneth Walker Jr., the Super Bowl MVP, to be their number 1 running back. You now bring Emmett Johnson in, who I believe is the perfect complement, because anytime you have a running back that can do the same things that your starter can do, it allows you to operate from the same playbook. So Emmett Johnson being able to come in and maybe get 8 to 10 touches each week, being able to run the football inside and outside, catch the ball out the backfield. Eric Bieniemy and Andy Reid should have a lot of fun finding different ways to maximize what Emmett Johnson brings to the table. Fifth round, you can't go wrong. And we talk about running backs can be found anywhere. This is one that we'll talk about later. How did Emmett Johnson fall to the 5th round? Because I think he is going to quickly outplay his draft status. 6th round, Green Bay Packers selecting Damani Jackson, cornerback coming out of Alabama. First, he went through USC, then ends up in Alabama. What I will say about Damani Jackson, having watched him in high school, this is a guy that in California won the 100-meter dash with a time of 10.25. I am telling you, as a former scout, when you're in the room and you can read legitimate track times to your coaches, everyone's ears perk up. 10.25 is elite. I mean, we're talking about bordering world-class time. Now, he had a knee injury that may have taken a little bit of that away, but what I know about Green Bay Packers, the Green Bay Packers are what we call a traits team. Height, weight, speed, all that matters. They believe in their development program. Being a 6th-round pick, lining up fast, being instinctive, high football IQ, even though he only has like 2 career interceptions, in that system where you can put your hands on people, where they love a tall, rangy cornerback, Damani Jackson is the prototype. And to get him in the 6th round, that is tremendous value. Hats off to the Green Bay Packers. Hats off to their West Coast scout for being able to stand up and say, hey, man, this guy was one of the premier guys that we were talking about in the draft. Let's make sure we throw a dart and see if we can hit in the 6th round. 7th round, I'm going to say this. Let's go to Buffalo and keep an eye on Amarj Reed Adams from Texas A&M with the Buffalo Bills. This is a big man, massive man that plays guard. He moves the furniture. He can smash people at the point of attack. And when you think about the Buffalo Bills, at this point, man, you're just adding bodies to the mix, guys who have a legitimate chance. Normally on day 3, you're looking for guys who have a redeeming quality that would give them a chance. And I'm going to say this guy's redeeming quality, he is a tail kicker. He mashes people at the point of attack. He is physical. He finishes with violence. And as a guy that is a late round gem, look for him to eventually work his way to being a starter, highly graded for some teams. And to get him in the 7th round, that is a nice addition to the Buffalo Bills lineup. And is one of the things that I think Brandon Beane will look back and say, hey, man, I really, really like this. Now, favorite overall team fit, favorite guy when it comes to like matching up how the team plays and how this guy plays. Let's go with the New York Giants again and Arvell Reese. And I know it was a bit of a surprise for Arvell Reese to be there, given how much we loved him and celebrated him leading up to the draft. But, man, the New York Giants have always, and I told the story, George Young, Jerry Reese, they talked about when you're the Giants, we dominate. We're physical up front. We overwhelm people. We take what we want and we impose our will. Well, now with Arvell Reese, you're talking about adding him to a front that features Brian Burns, that already features Kayvon Thibodeau, Abdul Carter, the way they can run around, Terrain Edmonds coming over. Well, Arvell Reese is the guy that is kind of like the Joker. We can move him in a bunch of different roles. We can blitz him off the edge. He can drop back in coverage. He can spy those athletic quarterbacks like a Jalen Hurts, like a Jaden Daniels. This is a luxury pick for the New York Giants, but he's also fully fitting the fabric of what they want to be under John Harbaugh. Love the pick. Can't get enough of it. So I'm excited about Arvell Reese going to the G-Men. And as you can tell, if I've already mentioned a couple of Giants, I am really excited about where the Giants are going in the direction, under the direction of John Harbaugh and how they're putting this team together. Final thing I want to talk about, the 2 most intriguing picks, I was going to say the most intriguing, but the 2 most intriguing picks have to be the quarterbacks. Day 2, Carson Beck and Drew Aller come off the board. And the reason why these are intriguing to me, these guys are tools guys that have the size, the arm talent, the experience to successfully play in the league. And even though some would say they had up and down careers, I actually think their journey will help them much like it helped Bo Nix. Now, I'm not saying their first round picks did not go start like Bo Nix did and lead the Broncos to prominence, but I am saying in those situations where they are, I think they surprise people with the way that they play. Carson Beck had 43 starts. Carson Beck played for 2 championship caliber programs, Georgia and Miami, respectively. Carson Beck delivered more times than not when they needed him. And even though people harp on the turnovers in some games, look, man, I think this guy has the toughness that you look for in a quarterback. So I'm all in on him with the Arizona Cardinals. And Drew Aller, what I like about him is this is a 5-star recruit, goes to Penn State, really has some success. Look, he had this team ready to go. They're on the precipice of being a national, in the national title game, had an interception. And then he breaks his leg and it ends his season and just unravels. But don't forget, this dude has special arm talent. He has the size that you want. He is matched up with Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy has developed quarterbacks like no other. Aaron Brooks, Aaron Rodgers, Dak Prescott. He has really done a good job of helping quarterbacks find their best versions of themselves. In Pittsburgh, with the Yinzers, I like this. I like Mike McCarthy working with him. So Carson Beck, Drew Aller. We talk about quarterbacks that could be in the best position outside of the first rounders. These two guys are my picks. That's why they're my most intriguing selections of the draft. So that was a quick review of the draft in terms of the players. What I want to come back next time is talk about the teams and how the teams got better, particularly the New York Giants and the New York Jets. They changed their cultures and they changed it in very unique ways. We'll touch on that on the next Bucky Brooks show. Until then, I am Bucky Brooks and I'm out. Oh, 25.